And now, now that you mentioned Nancy Pelosi, I wanted to ask your reaction about what's been going on, because the connection between what has been happening in Hong Kong and U.S. interference in Hong Kong is very connected to what's happening with Taiwan. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of these so-called secessionists, like opposition, right, color revolutionists, so to speak, they went to Taiwan after the unrest was dissipated. And Nancy Pelosi herself in 2019, in the lead up to the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which really got the ball rolling in terms of the United States government literally attempting to impose sanctions and enforce other
yeah,
sanctions on Hong Kong, sanctions on Iran and other
yeah,
countries
yeah.
on Hong Kong. She was part of the congressional leadership, which invited people like Joshua Wong and Nathan Law to Congress to lobby, so they could lobby for this legislation. Could you tell me what is your reaction to all that's going on right now, and what's the connection with Hong Kong? Because as you know, as all our viewers know, Nancy Pelosi just completed this provocative trip to Taiwan, which has angered China, rightfully so, and has really escalated tensions. What's your reaction to all of this, and what's the relationship to Hong Kong? Because it seems like there's a connection here.
Well, basically, one country in two system. This special system. A lot of people say, well, this is to try to prepare whether we can apply that to Taiwan as well, because of the historical reason. Even we are still looking for unifying China as a whole. So Taiwan is part of it. In 2019, the biggest winner over the whole movement is Tsai Ing-wen. She's almost losing her battle during that time. But then what's been happening in Hong Kong, they're using the scare tactics and this and that, trying to make people scared about the mainland Chinese government and things like that. So that's why a lot of people say, well, why don't we just vote for the green side? So which is the Tsai Ing-wen, Min Jingdang side. So a lot of people doesn't really understand the situation, because first of all, I realize a lot of the foreign viewers doesn't really understand what is one country, two system. What are the rights of the mainland Chinese government? Because we are one country, two system runs under one country first. Okay, so we're still under one country. So when I'm traveling on a piece of like immigration paper, I write Hong Kong SAR, China. So that is my national. You can't call Hong Kong an independent state because we have a one country, because we have a two system. A lot of people trying to ignore that. I mean, seasoned politicians in the Western world, they're trying to ignore the situation to say, well, Hong Kong is very independent. We are independently, we can do independently on businesses or say like Olympics and things like that because of the one country, two system law. So please look at the basic law, what we are granted the rights and things like that. We are granted the right to use Hong Kong SAR to go out and do our business forums and communications and things like that, but doesn't mean that we are another separate country. So that's very quite difficult sometimes for me to try to explain to a lot of people, because they don't really understand we have a basic law. They don't really understand the negotiations in between the UK government and the Chinese government and things like that. So that's why you see a lot of the overseas politicians are still using, especially the UK ones, still saying China breached our promises when we do the handover. But seriously, if you look at the basic law, it is only an agreement paper that all the clauses that Chinese government sort of like say, okay, we're already enacted within the basic law. So all has been already done. That's why a lot of the local Chinese government officials, including those government officials in Hong Kong, were saying the Sino-British Hong Kong, the British Hong Kong like agreement, British China agreement, is an overdated document because all the information and all the things were basically put down into the basic law. That's why we're running the basic law in Hong Kong. So I think it's very sad sometimes because Hong Kong is only a very small city. around the world. We have a very different system. You can't, I think often quite a lot of reporters that I get in touch with trying to use their standard or their country standards or their country's election rules to say why Hong Kong you're using this. I remember about 3 months ago, actually, yeah, about 3 months ago, I was actually in an interview with a European, I think it's a Danish TV station or whatever. They came to Hong Kong. I was having an interview with them. Well, they were asking me why is it illegal for a like a primary elections, right? Like a primary elections, because a lot of politicians were arrested because of that. I told them, well, if you look at the election laws in Hong Kong, it says very clearly, because it's a very different set of law. I mean, I've been running for 2 terms as a district councillor, as a legislator now. I know very well on all those election laws. In Hong Kong, we are looking for very fair elections. So it's very different to, say, in the US, where you can raise more money, right? You can do speeches and things like that. You can raise more money so you can spend more money on promotions and things like that. But it's not like that in Hong Kong. Everybody have a top bar of how much you can spend on your elections. Every single spending, you have to clearly record with receipt and things like that. We need to submit within 24 hours within that election period. So everyone are running on the same budgets, trying to make the election fair. No one, it says very clear on the law that no one can encourage or discourage anyone to run or not run an election, right? So if you're running a primary, if you look at the law, if you run a primary, that is what? Illegal. And at that time, when they try to run a primary, we have numbers of very senior government officials, including a lot of the Hong Kong like famous like heavyweight politicians, and they know the basic law very well and things like that, to say, well, that is not right. You need to stop. They got warnings. It's not that something made up, okay? They have a series of warnings. If you look back at the news and things like that, I'm sure there's a lot of English news that is available online for searching. If you look at that, they have done a lot of warning to say, well, this is not okay. You would get arrested because that is illegal. They didn't stop. When they get arrested, those just pro-democracy leaders, they say, oh, we didn't know they would be so serious this time. I mean, it's basically a joke. I mean, so if you're in Hong Kong long enough, if you read enough information, it's basically like a joke. I mean, you can't be the bad kid all the time. You can't think that I can do whatever I want. My parents or my mom's not gonna bash me up or whatever, right? So I think they're sort of having that momentum because they've been doing a lot of crazy things, and they think, "Whoa, Chinese government is okay. They can let us do this." Like same for the movement in 2019. Before that, it was okay. I mean, they just take out the street and things like that, and then they sort of like haste the blood and things. Well, that is okay. We can do some crazy stuff, and nobody's gonna stop us. They burned the Chinese national flag for about 7 times, if I remember, around 7 times. Like step on the flag, burning, and doing some really childish stuff because a lot of them are really young.
And holding American flags and Donald
yeah,
Trump
whatever,
insignia.
waving.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy's really famous. He got kicked down by one of the pedestrian ones. And well, yeah, the guy, this uncle got really angry. He said, well, why are you doing that? Like, we're Chinese people. But anyway, so they've been doing all that, just trying to make a lot of people to with them or trying to scare a lot of people to just mute themselves. It doesn't mean that a lot of people are supporting them. As I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of Western media in interviews and stuff like that. I remember one time, I was really angry at that time when he asked me that question. I think I was doing the BBC radio interview when they start using violence on the streets. I think that's like end of, I think it's like 30th of June or something like that, quite precisely. And he asked me, well, oh, now the mobs are using, now the protesters, not the mobs, now the protesters are using violence on the streets. So are you happy? Because now you guys can blame on the violence instead. And I was like, I got really pissed off, and I say to him, right, hello, I'm Hong Kong people. Why would I be happy to see we are bashing up ourselves, like Hong Kong people attacking Hong Kong people and doing all that and hating our own nations and things like that. Why would I be happy? I mean, what sort of things are going on with their mind can make them ask me that questions, you know? It's just very disgusting sometimes. It's just really sad. And every time when they interview, they keep on, you know, it's quite sad sometimes. I remember that was one time I was doing an interview with Al Jazeera. I got really pissed off because the organizer were lying when they're doing overseas interview. They're lying that they were the weakers. They're lying that they got bashed up, they got killed, they got raped or whatever. They were the one that were using violence on the streets to everyone, every single person, no matter they were like 80s or their child. They're attacking policemen's children that are only 5 years old. They were having their name list and everything, go into the kindergarten, telling people this kindergarten, this kid is a policeman's children. And then they will go and attack them. Even those, I'm just really sad, even those teachers that was working in the kindergarten, because their political views is different, they decided, okay, because you're a policeman's teacher, that the son, I will attack you, I'll attack her. It doesn't really matter, they're 3 years old, 5 years old, whatever. So it was to that extent. That's why I was so angry. I think having a different political views is totally fine. It doesn't really matter. It's like religions, right? You're Christian, you're Islamic, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But you don't go and attack people every day. You don't throw petrol bombs. You don't. I mean, a man actually passed away. An old man was actually passed away because they were throwing bricks and it hit his head. He passed away. Nobody mentioned about it. Every day on the Western news, they only mention how moral are those freedom fighters because they want freedom and democracy is the highest value of life or whatever. It's even higher than people's life. It's even higher than people's livelihood. I mean, anyone, if you decided to live in a city, right? You're looking for stability. You're looking for a place that you can build your career, have a family, have a safe place to have retirement or things like that. Hong Kong was a very good place to have all that before, but not anymore in 2019. It was just basically burning everywhere. For me, I was scared like for about a year time because I'm a politician and all my information was actually on Telegram. I don't have any private information anymore, to be honest, up until now. I still have crazy people sending me raw meat packages from Taiwan from last election in last year. End of last year for my legislative, because I'm quite vocal and I'm quite vocal on international platform. So the guy that flee to Taiwan decided next day is a bitch, so I'm gonna send her a pack of raw meat to warn her. So things like that. Why do you think that is okay? I mean, I remember quite a number of years ago, some like British politician was saying that because he's being a conservative parliament member, that's why his kids got bullied in school. Why don't he come up and talk about this is not okay in Hong Kong? No one. All the politicians were mute and saying, well, we need to support Hong Kong. Support what? By sending what, weapons? And I mean, encouraging their linked politician to write a letter. Seriously, I encourage everyone to search for that letter. A bunch of politicians wrote a letter from the Senate party, wrote a letter to the US Parliament to say, please sanction our country, but please sanction Hong Kong, right? And I remember I was doing an Australian, I think it's ABC News interviewed. Well, the interview is very biased as normally, as normal. And he asked me, why are those guys got like disqualified? I mean, they're politicians, they only sent a letter. And I said, come on, if you put on the, let's make a change of situation. Imagine if you have a bunch of parliament members in Australia send an exactly the same letter to Xi Jinping to say, the PRC government, please come and sanction our city because we have this and that and that. What would you do to those politicians, right? Imagine that was happened in US. They write a letter to the Chinese government to say, because Nancy Pelosi this and that, why don't you sanction? I think he'll get arrested immediately, right? So I think you can't keep on having double standard on only because we're Chinese. I've been doing a lot of the speech in the Human Rights Council in 2020. Well, that's about 3 meetings, or like the meeting schedules in 2020. I went to all of them, basically to share all those views. I mean, it's a normal views from a normal person. If you look at things, take out all the political views or whatever, you can't use violence. I mean, that's a universal standard on using violence on people with different views. But they think it's acceptable because you're Chinese, because you're supporting their movement, and because you're supporting democracy. I remember it's quite vivid that a lot of people know that that animates about a death god used knocking on every country's door. That's Syria, that's like Iran, and then that's Hong Kong, and now they're updating that to Taiwan. I mean, that's quite vivid. A lot of people around other countries know what is actually happening. They can't lie anymore, especially in Hong Kong. People are much smarter now. We are quite naive politically in 2019 before that. We think sometimes being nice, being like, like we believe in Confucius, right? Being nice to people can bring harmony and bring peace. But sometimes you just really need to end it in a strong way. I mean, you have to pay a big pause to say, this is enough. I mean, or else people can't live in the city anymore, because we've been giving enough time, about a year time, for them to try to take back a bit. They are unwilling to do any negotiations. They are trying to have like different requirements that is impossible to reach, and that is even breaching the basic law and things like that. So, I mean, the whole situation in Hong Kong is quite sad at that time. Still, like, at this moment, when people ask me, what do you think about the situation? I feel people still need time to mend their mind and things like that. I'm trying to encourage a lot of people, starting from this year, to try to listen more to people with different views and trying to understand them. Because I believe when people think, right, when they, after the 2019 and then there's like 2 years of pandemic situation, people will sit and still start thinking, and then they will know. During that time, maybe it's like all on emotion, but at this time, sort of they understand something's wrong. Somebody is trying to provoke this, and maybe it's about time for us to help ourselves. So start the conversation together, trying to rebuild the city into what we were always have. I mean, the economy is going up in 2018. A lot of people are trying to expand their businesses, but then in 2019, because of all the social unrest, we ran down. And then there's pandemic, we ran down. So this is about time for us to rebuild everything.